Okay, so this is a high-rise building. I was saying that we are normally used that architecture has to deal with the future, and paradoxically, sometimes architecture acts as a kind of flashback. And that's the case. We were winning a competition for the headquarters of the main oil company, and here we are in Libya, in Benghazi. So the competition was launched in 2007. And I think that's a crazy way just to think how much time has changed in these last 10 years. So how a building which is representing in a kind of spectacular way the power of oil and the power of a region that nowadays is, as we all know, unfortunately a victim of a very, very serious geopolitical conflict. Can give you an idea. So, but we have to do with the future in any case. And that's the reason that with Tongji University, we are now developing a laboratory on the future, a future lab city department. And we are trying to study the scenarios, the main scenarios that the future is showing us. Starting from this, and we all know that this is not simply a rhetoric. So what you see here are the flows of the air flights in a summer night on the European sky. And in a certain way, Europe, probably more than any other continent, is super well representing this crazy extension of the urban dimension everywhere. Europe is really nowadays just like one unique city. And this is causing many contradictions. One is the fact that probably a very old deal with the other species has been broken. And we are nowadays in a condition to rethink our relation with the other species. But again, we know so well how much cities are contributing for the 70% to the emission of CO2 in the atmosphere. And we know how this is causing some very serious troubles to the life of the citizens on this planet, and how it is drastically changing the climate condition all over the world. And again, how it's creating a paradoxical condition in which the growth extension of city is directly proportional to reduction of the forest environment. And we know that forests are contributing for the 35% to the capacity to absorb the CO2 that the cities are producing in the atmosphere. So in a certain way, I think we cannot avoid to think seriously to the future of our urban environment, and we cannot avoid to think seriously to the opportunity to imagine a different scenarios, or if you want, a different model of evolution. And also, when we talk about skyscraper, we cannot forget that more than 90% of the tall buildings, the high-rise buildings, the skyscraper that we built all over the world every year are covered by glass. And that's a serious point. We don't have anything against glass, but we know so well that glass is, in any case, mirroring the sunlight on the ground floor of our cities. And it's not exactly the best material to deal with some of the, more serious effects that the climate change is producing on our urban environment. So just to go ahead, I think we have some strategies to follow that could help us to imagine that we had to go in direction of different balance between the urban sphere, the natural sphere, and the agricultural sphere. We should think to vertical cities, and we know the reason, but at the same time we have to work seriously on new materials like wood that could contribute so well in the sustainability. We have to imagine how to absorb, to put inside our cities the relevant areas with green environments, because we know so well that leaves are absorbing CO2, are producing oxygen, are absorbing the dust the molecular dust of the industrial traffic. And again, I think that what we can do in terms of multiplicating the green surfaces in the horizontal part and the vertical side of the city, it's all in that kind of direction. But moreover, we have to really imagine a new model of evolution that doesn't go only in the direction of extension. We have to change drastically. We have to probably follow a totally different alternatives to imagine cities which are hyperdense, vertical, and with significant component, which is green. In a certain way, the experience we have done with vertical forest has this kind of basic reference. But it's not unique. Another very important point is that we have to work seriously on the idea of urban forestation. Well, that's a painter that's very famous. It's Ambrogio Lorenzetti in Siena in the 14th century. And Ambrogio Lorenzetti was asked to describe the relation between city and countryside. But at that very moment, you can see there was a very clear barrier. So there was a strong difference, a clear difference between these two universes. So we are now working in Tirana, in Albania, and we are imagining to reinterpret the Ambrogio Lorenzetti vision, trying to imagine a city who acts as a kind of kaleidoscope, where the relation between green environment, agricultural field, forest, woods, is not the one that we have seen in the Ambrogio Lorenzetti's painter, but it's more a kind of superimposition, like in a kaleidoscope of different environment. And this project for Tirana is, for me, very important because it is kept in condition to express how forestation, urban forestation, could be interpreted in different ways. One is to imagine to have peri-urban forests that are in a certain way surrounding the cities and also helping to stop the extension of its fabrics. Another one is to imagine it to enlarge the green and permeable environment and grounds inside the city with different kind of solution and with different kind of project. That's one that we are doing in Milano, where we are proposing a green river that will replace the line of the dismissed rail station in Milano. But this is not unique. Another important strategy to rebalance the urban sphere, the natural and agricultural sphere, it's about introducing graphs of biodiversity. And biodiversity is a very important point in our environment. The vertical forest was born from that necessity, the idea in 2011. It's an experiment. As you can see, it has been from the beginning an experiment. I consider this building, Anthony Wood knows this so well, a real experiment. We are an ongoing experiment that we have to follow and study. We have studied, thanks to a multidisciplinary group, many conditions and troubles that at the beginning was really serious. The two buildings are hosting, as you know, more than 20,000 plants, so 800 trees, 4,500 brush, and 15,000 plants of every kind of species. And for instance, one of the most interesting points that we have developed was exactly this, maybe the video, was about the maintenance. So we were at the beginning thinking to give to every tenant the opportunity to manage the green that was owned by himself, but finally we were oriented to create a kind of new profession, the profession of some kind of flying gardeners that are part of a central station that follows the growth of the plants, of the trees. And I like so much this idea because it's a way also to give back, to give to the natural elements of these two skyscrapers the dignity of a kind of common good for every inhabitant. We are working seriously to understand how will be the effect on the environment, on the quality of air of the vertical forest, and we just received from IIT a first survey, which is quite interesting. And for sure, we are also trying to understand how and if it would be possible to replicate or to variate the vertical forest prototype. Just to show you some example, we are now in construction in Guizhou of a building who has some of the characteristics of the vertical forest. That's an amazing region in China, probably you know, with more than 20,000 peaks all covered by forest. And well, just 5 years ago, the Chinese government decided to transform this region in a natural park, and they invited us to design the entrance to this park. Another project that we are following is in Chongqing, where in one of the last empty area nearby the center, we are designing a village which has trying to follow the philosophy of the vertical forest. And again, in Nanjing, where we are, in this case, quite replicating the Milanese vertical forest experience. But for sure, we are also trying to understand if it's possible to find different balances between the presence of trees and the traditional format of a skyscraper, of a tall building, like we are doing in Bogota, or like we are doing with these two buildings in Tirana that are hosting trees on the facades, but in a totally different way. But probably this is the most, in my opinion, interesting attempt or prototype that we are now developing, which is the construction. We are in Lausanne, in Switzerland, and we have changed a little bit the relation between trees and balconies and introducing lodges. And this has created, in my opinion, a totally different way to think the two things together. All this, as in the case of the Milanese, has to be seriously followed. So I think that this is a bunch of experiments that will be followed. Last point is the future. So the question is serious, is shall we move in direction of a new city, a new urban environment where nature is not simply an ornamental presence, but is something which is substantial. It's a structural part of buildings, a structural part of architecture. The answer is yes. We started to discuss with last year in COP21 in Paris, and exactly in that moment, we started to develop two projects in China. One is here in one of the most polluted regions of China. And in this case, the idea is to imagine to create a system of small cities with not more than 100,000 people, but completely green, with a high-rise building, with, let me say, what I think is the most relevant character of a new city, which is intensity. And then again, another experience is the one that we are doing in Liuzhou, where again, we are imagining in a different cost to work with a system of building that will be, at the end, completely covered with the vertical forest philosophy. All this is in a book because we think we are aware that what we have done is an experiment, and when you do an experiment, you have to be extremely transparent in what you do, in your success, but also in your mistakes. We have done both, and so that's the reason we decided to do a book that is a condition to be forever. And that's the vertical forest, who is now he was opened exactly today, 2 years ago, so I show you some last images of the picture. Thank you so much for your attention.